going on with you? What's new? Welcome back to the show.
Yeah, it's been a little while since I've been
Yes.
on the podcast. What's new with me? I don't know. Not a ton. My kids are getting older. Um, we're still loving I still call it our new house, but
2 years now?
yeah, almost 2 years. Yeah, my
That, that,
husband's
that
on.
flew by.
Yeah, no kidding. My husband's finishing the basement and finished all the framing, which is very exciting.
Nice.
Can actually like see and envision it all now. So
hmm
yeah. How about you? What's new and
Ah,
exciting?
it's same old. It's been a hectic start to the year, but kind of feeling, trying to get back into the flow of things
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and whatnot. So just trying to do that, and trying to get ready for spring and summer. We got the baby's third birthday in 2 weeks.
Yay.
Yeah, he's
That's crazy.
turning 3. I know it's nuts how fast it's already flying by. And we're going to be a family of 3, so I'm trying to take all of it in.
Right,
And I get it. It's special each time, when you have multiple kids do it, but like kind of that feeling of like we get to do it once and that's it.
right. No, see, I don't know that I appreciated it for either of my kids. Not because I have multiple, but more just I was always so eager for them to get to the next stage and be
hmm
older. I like older kids. They are more fun in my mind. So there are a lot of milestones and stuff that I'm just like, well, that's cool, but yeah, what's the next one?
hmm
um, yeah, and I already kind of artificially inflate their age in my mind. Like my kids are already in my mind ninth graders and sixth graders, even though they still have 2 months left of this school year as fifth
hmm
and eighth graders. But older kids are fun. Um, 3-year-olds though, that's tough. In between 2.5 and 3.5, that's the terrible twos in my mind. The beginning of 2 years old isn't too bad, but you're
Yeah.
smack dab in the middle of it.
Yeah. And I mean, so far, and I get it, I'm biased. He's been a fairly easy
He
baby.
seems like it, yeah.
He's easygoing. He has slept through the night since he was maybe, God, I can't remember exactly how old, but it felt like it was pretty early on.
Yeah, yeah,
Like he was always a good sleeper, and that's one of the ways we know something's wrong is when he doesn't sleep.
yeah.
It's a very clear flag. I mean, but he's definitely has his moments, like
Hmm.
like like I have a temper, so I have to make sure I leave the room because I don't want
Right.
him to see it. Because I've noticed, like when he throws a temper tantrum, like he starts chucking things, and I'm like,
Mm.
I don't know where he picked that up. He may have seen me do it once or twice,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't want him throwing stuff, so I can't be throwing stuff
Sure, sure.
because I've been known to throw things like my phone.
Ah, yeah. No, we've busted a few phones in our household that
Yeah.
way. No, I understand. And yeah, kids will see you be human and stuff, so long as they also see you
Mm-hmm.
apologizing and or making up for whatever you did. That
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And that's gotten harder for me as my kids get older, that they see more and more of my real raw moments, and we're now just two humans going through something rather than me trying to be the follow my example and all of
Mm-hmm.
that. Which is on one hand very nice. You know, I can be more my real self, but really surreal too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
um,
My dad was famous for saying, "Do as I say, not as I do."
oh sure, yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. um, oh yeah, my dad was quite the hippie growing up, and by hippie I just mean pot smoker. That's really, I don't
hmm
know that he was into the rest of the cultural stuff of hippiedom, but did a lot of drugs, and he would tell us stories about it, and my mom would just, Larry, don't tell the kids that. And we're like, oh no, we're good. He can tell us about how this is where he had his first LSD trip, because
hmm
that does not incentivize us in any way, shape, or form. Like, tell us the stories of the mistakes you made by all means. Um, yeah, fun stories though. So
Nice, but yeah. yeah, but parenthood is fun, and yeah, the last
Mhm.
3 years have just flown
Yeah, I
by.
can't believe. Well, it's fun because um I remember it also shows how long I've known you because if he's
Mhm,
3, then I've known you for almost 4 years. Because well, no, I've been at 33.6 4 years. So yes.
mhm.
'Cause yeah, so that's fun.
Yeah, because you and I were in London when I
Mhm.
found out that
Yeah, see,
my
that's
wife
where I
and I
was
were
going, but I
expecting.
didn't know if I was safe to say that. But yeah,
That's
I
fine.
was there when you were waiting for the news, and I was rooting for it all working out. So,
Yeah, and my
um,
phone died while we were out with Adam. So I get back and she's like, "Why haven't you answered?" I'm like, "My phone's been dead for the last 2 hours."
um, yeah, I remember being so excited for you.
Yeah, it's been good. Um,
It's crazy to
but
think I've
yeah,
been at 33.6 that long.
I know.
But yeah, just let's see, the 20th, no, the 18th. Last week was my four
Last
year
week,
mark.
okay.
Yep, because it was Summit was my first week. So
Oh, that's right. That's right.
crazy.
Yeah. But actually, you just gave me my transition, my
Ah, there
segue.
we go.
So I realized it's been a while since we've talked about this on the podcast. Like with the podcast topics, we try to cover a whole bunch of stuff. Everything from the theoretical and ways of running a company or managing a team or managing a client, down to more of the specific stuff like I want to talk about today. So while watching Summit virtually again this year, I realized it's been a while since we delved into the world of you know analytics implementation, or even if you just want to look at like data collection implementation. If
Right.
you want to
Mhm.
group in marketing data technology as well into that. So I want to record a few episodes diving into it and looking at it from a couple different perspectives. So I thought we'd start maybe at the higher level view today, and then start to kind of tease some of the areas we want to get
Yeah.
into. But like I was thinking about it last week, is what is the current state of implementation? Whether it's again web analytics, marketing technology, what are some of the things that we've seen, and what are some of the positive developments maybe we've seen in this area since the last time we've chatted about it, and also what are some of the issues that we see cropping up?
Mhm. Yeah, I feel like lots of things are changing, and particularly as things move more into not just server side, but kind of more big data model type of things, like we see with Adobe of the web SDK is that whole implementation. Yes, it does flow into Adobe Analytics, but it is built and designed for feeding into, experience platform or customer journey analytics. And we see that now with GA4 that it's much more of a, yeah, it goes into the GA4 interface, but kind of with the expectation most folks are probably going to take it out to BigQuery and do stuff there. So that is making implementation kind of more anticipating, yeah, and dealing with the data science side of things almost. It's no longer just, okay, we need an s.evar 50 for this thing that we're tracking. It's starting to be kind of bigger picture than that, and how that thing that you want fits into a bigger scheme of things rather than just it's 50 out of my 250 evars. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, makes total sense.
But at the same time, I feel like that's where the industry is trying to go. That's not where most folks are in their maturity and evolution. And um, I think a lot of it is still the same old. We just want page tracking. Give us the basics and let us crawl before we walk, before we run. And a lot of folks are still struggling with that much. And I think a lot of the time that's more of a vision and processes and leadership issue at a company than an actual technical problem. But it certainly affects the implementation side of things when you're not communicating with the right groups at an org and you don't have investment from the right teams. I feel like that's like 90% of problems these days are would be solved, of implementation problems would be solved if orgs were better designed for digital analytics, getting value out of their analytics. Yeah.
Where do you see some of the roadblocks then? Do you have a few examples?
Yeah, I think. Well, like I was saying, the industry is seemingly pushing folks more and more towards the Web SDK, CJA, GA4, all of that. But a lot of companies aren't anywhere near that step in their evolution, partially because of kind of data silos that if Adobe is trying to market this new grand world with AEP, but they're marketing it to the analytics team, well, the analytics team might be completely sold on the idea, but they're not the ones who make that decision. And as far as the rest of their org is concerned, they're just marketing data and not even really part of the big data discussion. I've had companies, clients that literally touted that they were data driven, and they probably were in their product interface, like products and CRM and all of that, but then they hadn't even implemented analytics, and yet they call themselves data driven, and it's just not even considered part of the big data picture for a lot of orgs. It's just that's marketing pixels. So yeah, uh, I think that's indicative of the roadblocks that folks have, that the next step for analytics is to become part of the data conversations at their company. And right now they're left out of that space a lot. They're also left out of conversations about, say, product enhancements on the site. Of, they find out at the last minute that there's a new feature that needs tagging. Like it needs to be better incorporated. Analytics needs to be better incorporated into a whole org, rather than just kind of seen as its own little marketing thing. Yeah.
When you say part of the bigger data conversations, how would you envision that as compared to what you're seeing today at many organizations?
So let's see here. For an example, I have a client that is trying to do more and more with their Salesforce data, and use that in grander ways and apply data science to it. And they have all these initiatives around the data that they have about their customers, and the data that their salespeople know, and stuff like that. But analytics hasn't ever really been a part of that. So they're moving forward with this big, let's integrate as much as we can. Let's get our Salesforce and Pardot and AdWords and like all of these things combined, and then nobody ever thinks to include the analytics, or if it is included, it's not included because it's going to be used, like that data is going to be used within the analytics tool. It's often just kind of an afterthought, or we need it as a key for other integrations or something like that. So I'm sorry, I feel like I keep on like going on a tangent from the questions that you ask. But yeah, I feel like that type of thing's happening a lot, where I've seen this now a few times, where there's a new data initiative at an org and analytics isn't a part of it. Or if it is a part of it, it's kind of an afterthought, it's squished in, it's not really seen as a key. And a lot of times they skip. So this company that's doing the Pardot and Salesforce data integration thing, they skip from we care a lot about Google AdWords and the campaigns that are pushing people to the site. How do we integrate that with our CRM? And they skip the whole what happened on the site in between them landing from the campaign and them becoming a lead and getting into our CRM. Like that part still just doesn't seem to be important. and I'm using this one org as an example, and maybe I just have too small of a sample size of orgs, but I feel like that's been a problem in a lot of different companies that I've worked with in the last few years, where uh, analytics and the online user experience just doesn't really have a home within an org of is it just a marketer's thing? Is it a product thing? Um, is it its own thing that, we have analytics because that's something that orgs do and we needed to check that box? Yeah, I think finding it its home and getting it a part of the right conversations is a big roadblock for a lot of analytics teams.
Mhm. Yeah, it's something Jason and I often come back to when we talk about, and we've used the analogy of like the holidays at home, and you've got the adult table and then you got the kids table.
Hmm.
And in analytics, it's been an uphill battle, and it's still an uphill battle of getting analytics to that adult table.
Hmm.
And some organizations, we've seen it where it finally does, there is this breakthrough. But yeah, it is. It's always seen as something extra. And that's the way it's always been throughout my career. It's always seen as extra.
Yeah,
And part of me can argue the conversation. Like if you're building an e-commerce store and the store can't process payments, then yes, as you're
sure.
building it, analytics is a
Priorities.
problem. But after a while, like that it needs to become a priority in being able to measure the behavior. So yeah, it's always been this thing where it's seen as secondary and extra, and even sometimes a burden.
Yes.
um a burden on the site instead of the value for
Well, and I still suspect that a lot of analytics teams out there are a cost center rather than a profit center.
it. Hmm.
Um, and that really bums me out. But I see that as a really big problem that folks have analytics because it's something they're supposed to have, but they're not necessarily getting a return on their investment, and not because of a lack of tool capability, but merely because they aren't incorporating it into business decisions outside of just analytics. Sorry, my puppy's sitting at my feet, and
No worries.
she's a big fat scaredy cat that is always on edge. And somebody walks by and she woofs, and I don't know if if um my mic ever picks it up that you hear in the
No, I
background.
haven't
Woof,
been hearing
woof,
it.
woof. So, sorry.
No, Jason's dog. She'll come running into the office midstream and start yelling because we always seem to be recording when the Amazon delivery person
Yeah.
comes.
Yep.
Uh,
Yeah.
but I thought of something else too, as far as this goes. And it goes back to something you said early on
Mhm.
with a lot of, at least the vendors, we could think of Adobe with CJA, Google with GA4, and it kind of pushing the users, pushing the industry in a direction that many aren't necessarily ready for.
Mhm.
So do you remember the Sega Dreamcast?
Yeah.
So, like, I never had one. A buddy of mine had one, but the one thing I always remember about it was way ahead of its time.
Yeah. Yep.
It was built for online multiplayer games and whatnot, and it hit a few years too early, before people were ready, and it ultimately killed Sega as a hardware developer and whatnot. And I mean, this is, a pretty crazy question, but do you think, like, I thought of that example when you were talking about the vendors pushing the space in a direction maybe that's not ready for yet. Um, and we may not see something the level of the Sega Dreamcast, but that's officially what
Mhm.
came into my mind. Do you think we could be going down, say, that kind of path?
Where the effort to push forward ends up alienating people, or just it burns out too soon, so
Yes.
it never
Yeah,
really comes to fruition.
it's too ahead of its
Yeah,
game,
yeah.
too ahead of its
Um,
time.
well, I think there are a lot of Google Universal Analytics users out there who would have something to say about that this week. The number of conversations I've seen on Twitter of folks saying, what tool are we moving to? Because we're not sticking with Google. It's remarkable to me. And unfortunately, a lot of them that are saying that, the reason that they would move tools is because they know that they're not really mature enough. They wouldn't get value out of GA4, even if they love the model and the concept behind GA4 and the events and the way it handles sessions differently and all of that. That makes sense. That is the way of the future. But we're not evolved enough to make use of that kind of data set. So let's look at other tools. Well, GA was the basic entry level easiest place to get started, and now where do you go if that requires more maturity than your org has? Do you go to Adobe Analytics? Because Adobe's, like, historically, that's been it's better if you have a bit more maturity and a bit more resources, and it's a powerful, flexible tool that's a little bit more resource intensive. Well, GA4 is now too. So where do you go? What do you do?
So the users aren't too mature, or the product isn't mature enough?
Well, fair. No, I was speaking specifically about users, and
Okay.
or users orgs, I should say. That, like I said, if GA4 is super valuable, particularly when you take it out of its half-baked reporting interface and stick it into BigQuery and do stuff with it there, well, then an org has to be at a place that they know how to get value out of data in BigQuery rather than just the GA interface. Yeah, so specifically, are users ready to move to that model when they were struggling to just be the marketing team, marketing data team that their org seems to have relegated them to?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So now this is where I'm going to show my ignorance. I'm familiar with, what's been the standard GA, the Universal Analytics version. I haven't seen GA4, so I mean, I only know of it, from, like, the differences from a conceptual level,
Sure.
but not
Yeah.
like the actual, like, hardcore usage level. And God, I just, as I'm talking, I just lost my train of thought. God.
Yeah, I keep doing that a lot today. Sorry. Well, and I will say that would also not consider myself an expert on GA4. I have some experience with it, but I am one of the many people that will be scrambling to try to become more of an expert on it quickly.
Do you think? So you actually just made me remember my train of thought here. Where I was going with that is at least from the conversations I saw online. Do you think this is an issue where Google's shoving too many features in, and it's just somebody wants something just like they just want to keep it simple, just keep, give me my simple analytics versus, loading up with maybe features I'm not going
Right.
to use.
No, I don't think it's a features thing, though it is a keep it simple thing. In truth, it's lacking quite a few of the features that Universal Analytics has, at least at this point. I think it is just more of we're used to a page view being a page view and being able to open the UI and see a page view report or a pages report. Whereas GA4 is more of we're going to leave it a little bit wider open for you to define what it is that you want to track. So, page views, but everything's an event now. And Adobe's doing something very, very similar with the Web SDK, that there's no more s.t or s.tl beacon. It is you define that this beacon was a page view and therefore increments your page view report once, and there may not even be an out-of-the-box page view report. It's you are the architect of all of it, which is, again, powerful, flexible, the way of the future. For folks who already have that kind of mindset, then fantastic. But it's just a much higher learning curve and resources, much more resource intensive. Yeah, that's how I see it, at least. Turn on my do not disturb. People stop pestering me.
So, I mean, we've spent some time talking about, some of the recent developments we see is like, we're on the not so positive side.
Mhm.
Like people like, this feeling of like people being forced down a specific path. Over say the last 2 years, what do you see maybe like in the data architecture and implementation world? What have you seen that we kind of fall under the positive side of things? Like, hey,
Hmm.
this is a stark improvement over past years.
Workspace keeps getting better and better. Yeah, I will say that the tools are providing a lot more powerful, and I don't want to portray what I was talking about of GA and Adobe kind of pushing orgs more and more towards being advanced. I don't want to portray that as a wholly negative thing, because it's not. For orgs that are ready for it, I actually think it is fantastic. CJA is fantastic. Um, and I'm sure that if I knew GA4 better, um, and I had an org that was ready to really dive into it and get a little bit more data sciencey perhaps or whatever, I'm sure it would be fantastic too. So yeah, it's not entirely negative. I just see it as making the barrier to entry for analytics much higher. And to me, that's the negative aspect of it. But um, I do think moving more to this event-based model of it's not just a page loading, it's you define what it was that happened. I do think that makes a lot of sense. We live in a world of single page apps and or mobile apps or whatever, and page views aren't really the thing anymore anyways, and we need to start thinking differently. It's just it's a transition.
Mhm. And it's felt like, at least for me, when it comes to data architecture, I mean, there's always something new to learn, a new tool, but better ways to do things, ways to hone the craft of architecting, data collection, and whatnot using the various tools. But I kind of feel like we're reaching this cusp where things that like things are about to be upended.
Hmm.
Um, and again, while there's ways like we've been able to hone the craft, say over the last 5-6 years, things have been fairly the same. An
Yeah.
implementation has been an
A lot of the
implementation.
things I learned at Omniture my first 3 days of training in 2006 are still true, at least for now.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's uh, things are getting upended for sure, and we're all going to have to adapt pretty quickly, I think.
So, for those that work in this space, what are some of the ways that people can prepare for this? Whether it's on an individual level, on an organizational level. I know Google has really laid the gauntlet down with needing to, if you're still in Universal Analytics, get off by July of next year. Adobe's got things on the horizon, but they haven't announced anything yet. So maybe the urgency isn't there, but like for folks that like they see this coming, what are some of the ways you can prepare for it?
um, well, I think some of it does come back to what I was talking about earlier, where there are roadblocks and problems within orgs where the analytics team needs to be a part of the right conversations and needs to be viewed as a true data team rather than martech pixels and page view data. So as far as preparing an org goes, I think that would be a really big step, is getting analytics to be viewed more as big data as part of the big data picture. And
Hmm.
so far, as far as individuals go, well, it's kind of the same thing, that we need to start understanding more and more of from a data scientist perspective of if I am going to be using a more powerful querying tool, and uh, yeah, that's something that a lot of us need to learn still. Um, because it just hasn't been necessary up until now. And while yes, Adobe is not forcing people into it, but a lot of the new coolness and like at Summit, so much of what they show, I'm like, oh, that would be cool. I would love that. Oh, that's customer journey analytics only. All right. So you're not being forced to upgrade. You can keep your Adobe Analytics for as long as you want, but if you want to take advantage of aspects of the web SDK and you want to take advantage of all of the new things that Adobe is throwing into CJA, then you are going to have to upgrade and start thinking in terms of bigger data. Because let's say the analytics team gets its way and they convince their company to up for customer journey analytics, and they are now no longer just the martech data team. They are the martech data team, but now it can be part of all of the other data because CJA, you throw all of the data you want in there from any source that you want in there. And then other teams say, oh, wait, no, but we've been doing that in BigQuery for a while. Or something like, we just never thought of including the analytics data. So yeah, trying to marry those two ideas together of it's not just your online user journey anymore. It is part of a bigger data picture of what data you have on that user. And therefore we need to be able to work with that bigger data set. And that requires knowing more than just S props and EVARs. Yeah.
Yeah. And now I'm trying to think of,
Well,
my next question.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm trying to think of like my next question. I'm kind of spacing at the moment.
Sure. When I think that event-based model, we see that certainly with the web SDK and with GA4. We also see it with data layers now, that it's no longer a have your data layer ready by page load. It's fire the page load event into your data layer, and then anything else that happened around that time period, and have them all combine into a data layer. Yeah, so I think everyone has to start thinking more in terms of user events, and that also makes it easier to kind of extrapolate into other contexts when we're no longer just thinking about page views. We're thinking about all the data we have on a user, and therefore, you get more value out of a tool like CJA or GA4.
That's the thing. Like there's so many more things I want to talk about, but I don't want to get into too much
detail.
Yep. Because I really want us to dig into like, what are the key things for a solid architecture? What are the key things to know? And yeah, so like this was really meant to just kind of kick us off and talking about like what are we seeing? What are some of the big things that were coming? So to kind of summarize it, the big thing is we have major architectural changes coming, in the form of, complete brand new versions of a lot of these tools. So if I look at Adobe, for example, now, I mean, that's been my weapon of choice for 12 years now. It's still Omniture underneath. It's still Omniture underneath. And what I'm seeing with CJA is it's a completely new thing. It's not just taking that Omniture underpinning and putting some new features on it and a new skin.
So fortunately, at least with CJA, it is, the underlying data is different and bigger and not what we're used to. But at least the reporting interface is something I'm used to. Like Workspace, it's basically Workspace, just cooler, with a bit more capabilities because it has that kind of big data underpinning. Whereas GA4 is just entirely different from GA3. So, and I don't want to be implying that GA4 is to Universal Analytics as CJA is to Adobe Analytics. It's definitely not a one-to-one kind of comparison there. But there are definitely similarities as well. Yeah.
So maybe outside of just analytics, what else are you seeing like with just martech in general? Because I mean, one of the things, I could kick off this piece. Like one of the things I've been noticing, and it's been a trend for the last several years, so it's not completely new. It's just been the utter consolidation in the market. because 10 years ago you could have a martech stack that was, you had your Adobe Analytics, you had your ESP, which was another vendor. Maybe
Hmm.
you had Salesforce as your CRM. You would have Google for your display ads, another tool for
Right.
managing your paid search through Google and Yahoo and now
Yep.
Bing. But now it's like, people are buying entire ecosystems, just one, like you're buying into the Google stack, you're buying into the
Right.
Adobe stack, you're buying into the Salesforce stack.
Sorry, back to that. That to me, Salesforce is part of the Google stack, even if it's
Mhm.
not. And I have a client that's currently moving from Adobe to Google because they are Salesforcey, and Salesforce
Mhm.
integrates with the whole Google stack better. Whether or not that's true or that's just a thing that people believe, we'll see. But you're right. And Google's doing a very good job of building its walled garden of,
Mhm.
you know, Adobe's great, but it can never get at the Google AdWords data like Google can. You know, it's just
Yeah.
inherently part of the technology. Um, and if Google owns DoubleClick and all of those things and integrates better with Salesforce and all of that, that's going to be really, really hard for Adobe to keep competing against, even if it's, trying to like CJA can take data from all sorts of sources now. So in theory, those integrations are easier and all of that, but they're not as native for
Mhm.
sure.
Yeah, because that's where I wanted to go with this is do we see more consolidation here? Or do we see something that is ripe for disruption, someone to come in and kind of blow up this pattern of consolidation?
Um, no, I do see more consolidation, and part of that is also around privacy stuff that Google and Apple both are making moves that, again, give them their walled garden of data that you kind of have to be all in on Google if you want to take advantage of the things that's coming down the line with Chrome. For a while it was Flock, now it's Google Topics. That there just really aren't alternatives. Same with Apple, that Apple has data and visibility into things that now, because of app tracking transparency and other and ITP and all of that, um, that outsiders, non-Apple entities, just simply can't compete. So no, I do see consolidation definitely being a thing. But we also, I mean, Google owns the world, and
Mhm.
they just, whatever they don't own, they're going to own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think you bring up a point, right, even before getting into privacy, that paid search is such a key for just about any business when it comes to marketing.
Hmm.
Like, I mean, that's right there. Having that data within your analytics the way you do, you get it with GA. Yeah, like that's a major shortcoming when it comes to many of the other tools.
Yep. And one that's not even really their fault. Like, what can you do?
Yeah.
Um, so other than try to build up your ecosystem in a way that it integrates with other data sources better, like
Mhm.
customer journey analytics.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I mean, and part of it is wishful thinking, because I would love someone to come along and find a
Oh
way
yeah.
to break that up. But you're right, the privacy laws are just give a lot of these
Yeah.
companies the reason to consolidate, or the
Right.
the reason to build these walled gardens.
And if
Because Facebook's
anything,
doing it, Apple's doing it.
yeah, if anything, the disruptors might be the new browsers and the settings and all of that that say no more third-party cookies.
Hmm.
Um, you have to completely rethink your model in some marketing contexts if you don't have that. So that's definitely a disruption. Whether or not I see that as evolving forward or backwards is another thing, but that's a whole other discussion I could probably talk about for a long, long time.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I would love to talk, a bit about privacy and what that is upending, and, at the moment, and just I love your term when it comes to privacy, that it's a game of whack-a-mole right now when it comes to data collection. That, every time you find a way to, I don't want to say way around it, but a way to deal with it.
Sure. Yep.
Someone comes along, a regulatory body, one of
something
these
else.
companies, they come in and just knock that down. So you got to find something else.
Well, and it's not even necessarily regulatory bodies. It's really Apple and Google
Mhm.
themselves that are whacking the moles.
Mhm.
And it's so funny to me because like take the Google Topics API that they're saying by 2023 we're going to do away with third-party cookies, and that makes all the marketers freak out. And so Google appeases them by saying, "Oh, but don't worry, we'll have this Topics API. So instead of third-party cookies telling you that your user is into dogs or whatever, group that they are in, we're going to have a Topics API that tells you which user group is into dogs, and you use that." And the whole thing to me that's really funny about that is what problem were we trying to solve if users didn't like creepy relevant targeted advertising? And in the user's mind, that is the privacy issue and the thing that
Mhm.
most folks are talking about when they say boo on third-party cookies. They're just finding a new way to kind of accomplish the same thing because they don't want to ruin the marketing industry, but they want to do something that makes it look like they're respecting privacy more.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, the something that they're doing that makes it look like they respect privacy more is much more proprietary to Google. So it's a win-win for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's really my main thing with all of the privacy stuff is what problem are we solving for? Because I think a whole lot of it is doing stuff for the sake of doing stuff, and frequently it actually is a net harm to the consumer. So all in the name of privacy.
Yeah. It's a lot of it's fear mongering.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
A lot of it's fear mongering, and yeah, I do like that. Doing stuff just to do stuff.
Yeah.
So,
And then in many cases, it's doing stuff to benefit Google or Apple.
Of course.
But in the name of privacy.
Yes. Well, yeah. I mean, that's a whole other topic.
Oh yeah.
Companies using legislation, that's pitched one way, but it actually does the opposite.
Yeah. Well, and again, it's not even necessarily the legislation; it's just the browser policies themselves, and what Safari and Chrome are doing.
Yeah, but I think they kind of leverage like the scaremongering around privacy and the movement on legislation like GDPR and CCPA as
they feed into each other for sure.
They feed into it, and it becomes this vicious cycle.
Yeah, but
and then
it's interesting because in doing so, they've made it sound like, GDPR is about cookies. That is the privacy problem we're trying to overcome. GDPR, that whole 80-page document mentions cookies once, and even then as an example. It's not about cookies, it's about the data. So but when Google and Apple and everyone else talk about it, they talk about it in terms of cookies because that's a problem we can solve. We can block cookies.
Yeah.
But the personal data thing, we're not really willing to give up on yet. So let's just make everybody think the problem is solved if we block cookies. Because cookies has just kind of become the placeholder word for respecting privacy, blocking cookies. That's what you do.
Yeah.
And yeah, you definitely see that shared between the policies and the regulations and the browsers and the big players, that they're all going along with that illusion that it's about the cookies.
Exactly. And that's why I think a lot of it's theater.
Yeah.
But then I also think a lot
it's
of
like taking your shoes off at the airport. Doesn't actually stop or do anything. It just makes us feel like something's being done.
It makes us feel like something's being done, and it gives justification for certain things.
Yep.
So
sorry, that's a major tangent. We went off in
no, it's good.
far from the implementation stuff, but it does affect the future of analytics quite a bit. There is a new Adobe thing that I think kind of snuck under the radar for a lot of folks, that the user for a while it was called user generated ID. I think now it's just called device ID or first party device ID, where Adobe is making it more beneficial to set your own user ID and make it so that if you do so, it affects your data. S.visitor ID never works the way we wanted it to. This does. And that is definitely going to be the way of the future, I think, that not necessarily to get around GDPR, because GDPR cares about what the data is, not cookies versus not.
Yeah, go ahead. I just got to step away for a quick second, but I will be right back.
But certainly to get around the cookie blocking and all of that, organizations are going to have their own way to identify a visitor. And analytics tools are finally getting to the point that they can really take advantage of that if you do it. The problem in the past has usually been if on page A your user's not authenticated and on page B they are authenticated and you start using their user ID to identify them, then they look like two visitors because there was a different ID on each page. But now the tools have come around to the point where they can merge that profile together and make sense of it, so that we have options that aren't just relying on Adobe's ECID cookie or whatever it is.
But no, and that's one of the things I want to dive into more, as far as like the customer IDs, because I definitely have a few use cases where we don't need to jump over to it right now, but I see clients wanting to go that way. Just because with cookies and because they want to get down to, like, they want to know visitor level information, because they are trying to report, merge back to, say, leads they have in Salesforce, and all of that. And so if people are clicking through emails on multiple devices, and it gets into this whole mess. But then also just with cookies expiring, because they're also a type of business where people are not going to be visiting multiple times within a 7-day period.
Right.
Because if you think about Safari and
there's definitely some business models where
it
is longer than a 7-day. Like, we work with a lot of cruise lines, and that is definitely people dream of cruises years in advance and revisit periodically and eventually buy their cruise. So that window is much, much more important.
And higher education is the same thing. With higher education, you have people that visit for a period of time, but then may not visit for another 6 months.
Right.
So, being able to, get around some of the things with just like, if I visit today and I come back in 3 weeks, if I'm, say, using Safari,
which
just
about half of internet traffic is, if you include mobile traffic.
So this is definitely a tangent, but I think this is definitely something I know I want to dig into more, because I see a need to, when it comes to implementation, making sure that you're setting up a client, or whether it's an internal client or if you're a consultant, an external client, to be able to deal with this exact thing, and not just be able to count on, say, default cookies that are set and track visits and visitors.
Well, and especially with Apple, they've made it so much more complicated than just third party versus first party, that it's first party created by JavaScript, or first party, versus first party created by a server. Like, there are classifications within it that make a big difference. And folks are going to have to learn real quick the difference between a JavaScript generated cookie and a server side generated cookie, even though they're both first party. It's all complicated.
But I think that gives us a good spot to wrap up this week and to pick up with next week. So like I said, this was meant to be kind of more of an introductory episode to kind of get us going down this path of what's going on in the world of data collection, implementation, and architecture, and all of that. And next week, I want to dig into the key aspects of a solid architecture, a solid implementation. And I think that this is understanding your business model and what you need to understand, with visits, visitors, and IDs and all of those
Yep,
pieces
yep.
there.
Indeed.
Yeah. So Jen, it has been great chatting with you.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
been a
Welcome
while.
back to the show. So let's go ahead and wrap up there for now, and we'll catch everybody next week.
All right.
All right. See ya.